So Candyman is directed by Bernard Rose, who also did the screenplay, and it's based off of the short story *The Forbidden* by Clive Barker, and it was released in 1992. The movie is about a grad student named Helen Lyle. She's researching superstition and murders that are happening in the Cabrini Green area, and she soon finds out that she's getting too close to finding out that this is maybe not just superstition, and that's what makes the movie so much more scary. Is the fact that a lot of us have heard a lot of these campfire type of stories that you tell, and a lot of superstition like Bloody Mary and things like that. There's always a story that people tell you to keep kids in line and things like that, and that's what Candyman was, and that's what Candyman explored, and so that's the lasting impression of it. And almost any kid that grew up watching that movie, to this day, there's still flashbacks of when their big brother or sister or their aunt or their mother or someone would tell them, to go to bed, or Candyman will get you, or something like that, or seeing Tony Todd for the first time, and he'll always be forever in your mind as, Candyman. It's one of those iconic roles. He doesn't really actually live and die by that role. It's just something that he did. It was a job, but the fans have taken it and just said anything that he's in, he's always going to be the man with the hook. Okay, so the significance of Candyman. First of all, it wasn't a sequel. At that point in the early 90s, you had Child's Play 2, Child's Play 3, Alien 3. You had, Halloween 5, and you had Freddy's Dead, and, movies like that. This was like the first hardcore sequel. Like, this was the first time you ever had a solo film that really actually was scary. Everything else was a sequel. That's from like the 80s coming into the early 90s. Or you had gimmick type of movies like Leprechaun or something like that. This was like the first hardcore horror film of the 90s at that point. That's what made Candyman so significant. It was the fact that this was a movie that was genuinely scary. It had really great cast, really great performances, and the gore is there. There's pretty good scenes of terror right there in that movie. That definitely kicked things into high gear. It took horror out of the suburbs. Now, with most horror films, for me, I'm not really afraid of them, for the simple fact that it's at the camp. It's in the suburbs. It's in the woods. Somewhere in Texas or something like that. It didn't really affect me at all at that point. But when it went to Chicago, when it went to the housing projects, that's when it definitely got my attention at that particular point. And then for the character, the main character, to be, Tony Todd, and forever he'll be Candyman because of this. And the thing that made it interesting, because there was a lot of flack at first, but eventually it became the iconic role that it is through time, But at that time, there was a lot of controversy because no one wanted to see, some black serial killer lusting after, a white woman. So that was a big deal with the NAACP. And at that point, but it's like, look, it's a horror movie. It's just a horror movie. It's just fiction. Let's just have some fun with it. And the interesting thing about that was, why not? Why not have, a black Freddy Krueger or a black Jason or a black, Chucky, et cetera, et cetera. That was the significance of that as well. Of Candyman was the fact that, you can be the hero, you can be the villain. And in Candyman's case, you had a new villain. you know, coming in fresh from the 90s, having a new villain, because we were still getting Child's Play, you know, we were still getting some Child's Play sequels, we were getting some Halloween sequels, we were getting some Jason sequels, and some Freddy sequels, and, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know, sequels, but this was something that was homegrown from the decade. And with that film, it opened up the doors for more horror films to come from out of the suburbs and into quote unquote urban areas, so like Tales from the Hood. And then you would have more of a screen presence of other people of color to be in horror films. You know, for example, you know, Jada Pinkett in Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, or, you know, Omar Epps and Jada Pinkett again in Scream 2. And then you would have, you know, LL Cool J, you know, and Halloween H2O, or you would have Brandy. Some people forget Brandy was in a horror film, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. She was in the sequel to I Know What You Did Last Summer. And, you know, that's what, for me, I think the significance of Candyman had opened the door, you know, for more progression. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you go and see it, for the simple fact that this is the movie that kind of made horror movies cool to see again. The reason why we're seeing horror movies right now is because of the stuff that happened in the 90s. You know, this was before Scream. You know, as far as slasher movies are concerned, slasher movies are the ones that definitely keeps people going to the theaters. You know, it's a body count type of movie, so you're always going to see people get dismembered and get killed off one by one, and that's what those movies are. They're always going to be fun. So your Jasons, your Michaels, your Freddys, your, you know, Leatherface and all that stuff, like those movies are so easy to make, but yet so much fun to see. So with slasher films, for example, that was something that really kept Hollywood going as far as those type of horror movies are concerned. And so we had a new slasher character. We had a new slasher in the theaters in 1992, which was, you know, Candyman. And then Scream would come by and really get all of the, you know, all the fans to come out again, you know, with what they did, you know, with turning it on their ear and things, turning a whole genre on its ear. That's what, you know, Scream would do. But before Scream, you know, before Scream 2 and whatever, it was Candyman that really got the ball rolling for much more harsher, much more scary, and much more compelling storytelling. It really was the movie that made everyone step their game up in the 90s. And you can look back at it now and sure, it's dated or whatever, it was the 90s, but it's obviously a lasting impression on anyone who's ever seen it to this day. And some people are still genuinely afraid of it. And you can see why they're making a remake as we speak. You know, it definitely is an iconic film, definitely a cult classic. And if you haven't seen it, I definitely suggest that you do. This movie made stars, definitely. And also, too, you know, it's just a spooky story. It's a really great soundtrack by composer Philip Glass, who has almost this gothic, almost Phantom of the Opera type of sound going on with the soundtrack that really adds more spookiness to the film itself. And with the performance of Tony Todd that made him a star, you can see why. It's this regal, spooky phantom type of character that he played. You know, when he walks, you don't hear any footsteps, and his voice is so deep, and it echoes. You know, it echoes all through the room. It's definitely genuinely creepy and genuinely scary in certain areas. It still holds up in certain areas, but definitely looking forward to the remake. Jordan Peele is remaking it. That's going to be a good thing to see, because with another generation of horror fans coming up, they maybe didn't see the original. Having this remake or reimagining would definitely bring people back to the first one. And so you want to see the first one.